My name is Jonathan Taylor, and this is 10 Reasons Why You Fail as a New Security Professional and How to Fix It. Now this is an expose on me. What you're seeing here are all the things that I did to screw up my career over the past 24 years, 23 years, something like that. And ways that perhaps you can avoid some of the mistakes that I made. If that's one thing I can do to help, that's what I'd like to do. I'm going to have some polls during the meeting where I'd love to get your feedback on these because they help make the point that I'm trying to make as part of the presentation. So if you grab your smartphone and you scan that barcode, it should work if you do it from up here. That'll get you to where it's at. And when it comes to that point in the slide, it'll activate that particular survey and you can answer it as it comes up. All right, first off, a little bit about me. Let me get this out of my noise range here. I am an information security privacy director. I live in Sacramento, California, Rockland, for those that know the area, specifically where I'm at. I've been 23 years in the healthcare industry as an IT engineer, as an architect, as a privacy officer, as a cybersecurity specialist, and as of 9/17, I'm actually a free agent. So if you are looking for somebody that's got a lot of experience and leadership skills, come talk to me. I'd love to talk to you. I did graduate from Brigham Young University in 1996 with a degree in family science. There's an interesting story there that if there's time at the end, I'll tell about that one. I have been a cybersecurity professor. I'm an incurable electronics tinkerer. I'm not very good at any of these things, but I like to think that I am. And I certainly keep trying because that's what hacking is all about. You keep trying until you get a little bit better at it. Many years ago, one day I sat down at some tables at the Alexis Park during DEF CON 9, and the guy next to me says, "Hey, you want to play?" I said, "Play what?" And he says, "Hacker, capture the flag." I said, "Okay, seems like a fun thing to do. That'd be great." Well, we did okay. We did okay. We came back again the next year thinking it was just a fluke, and we won a second time. So I was team co-captain the second year. Digital Revelation, DigRev for short. Those are fun times. So this presentation is meant for this type of person. This is really the target. This is the person that I was when I started out in security. Security comes naturally to you, but speaking doesn't. Packets and code make sense, but people in politics don't. You've got a lot to offer, but people are not taking you seriously. Does this sound familiar? You and I have a lot in common. Please stay in this presentation and listen. Now, I mean this very seriously. This presentation is intentionally designed to get you to take a long, hard look in the mirror. If you suffer from anxiety, depression, or a related disorder that may trigger negative emotions or behaviors, please use discretion in attending this presentation. And I mean that in the sincerity of my heart. I have dear friends that have committed suicide. And I never want anybody to face that. All right, first survey, and there's a couple have already put some stuff in, thank you. This is the first survey. What industry do you work in? This helps me get an idea of the people that are here in the audience today. And it should automatically pop up, there we go. And if you see the same one come up twice, it will make it bigger, there we go. Word clouds are fun. Okay, we got some healthcare people in here, all right. I'm a healthcare guy. All right, so we've got a good cross-section here. Software companies, information security in general. I've met and I've talked to a lot of state government people and federal government people that I've met so far at the conference? All right, this is good. Yeah, if we get to 100, it'll stop working on me because I'm too cheap to pay for the actual service. All right, this is good. I'll go back to it again so we can see later on. But this gives me a good idea, and hopefully you as well, the types of people that are here and what we're learning. Okay. All right, cool areas we will cover. Constellations of thought, the imposter syndrome, taming your uncouth brilliance, and hack to learn, learn to teach. These are the sections. And then I'm going to just right off the bat give you the bottom line up front, the 10 mistakes that I made. We're going to go over each one of these. Number 1, creating bad experiences for others. 2, failing to harness the imposter syndrome. 3, the mic is always hot. 4, details, too many details. 5, acronym assault. 6, a vulnerability is not a risk. 7, a control gap is not a risk. 8, good grief, does anyone actually know what a risk is? 9, I don't speak Corpy or Govy. 10, why should I learn to land the plane? We're going to go over each one of these so you'll understand what I'm getting at. To start with, constellations of thought. So this has to do with how the mind orders things. So I want you to imagine in your own mind the way that you think about things and how you come to your understanding of the world that you see around you. Lots of studies have been done, and I apologize if you happen to be an expert in this field. These are things that I've learned reading a lot of things online. I may have completely missed who actually came up with these theories. I learned them. I'm a hacker. I pick what I can learn, what I can get out of it, and I can make it useful for me. If I have failed to cite or reference the person that did the research, feel free to come and talk to me about it afterward, and I will update my slides. But the constellations of thought theory, I know there's a lot of people that have talked about this, how the mind orders things. Your mind is kind of like this vast constellation of space. You've got clusters of stars over here and over here and over here. And what those are the things that you have thought. They're the things that you have learned. They're the things that people you have met, experiences that you've had. You classify them in your own constellation. You move them around occasionally. When you meet someone, you learn a thing or two about them. You have to classify them. You want to figure out what constellation am I going to put them in. They're going to go over here with the people that don't believe in wearing masks. Are they going to go over here with the people that are religious? Are they going to go over here with the people that don't know how to really clearly speak and communicate? Everybody has this in their own head. Everybody thinks this way. It's the way that the human mind actually maps the information that it records. The problem is, things change. People change. Over time, people become different. Over time, things progress. You get better at things. Eventually, you get forced to recall something that you've already classified somewhere. You got to bring it forward. You've got new input. Now the control variables are different. Now the control variables are different. You have to reassess that thing, that person, that object. And you have to now classify it in a new spot. This is the way that many of us think. Which brings us to, and it's not moving. There we go. Which brings us to mistake number 1. Creating bad experience for others. So Jim Silva is a data center manager, a very, very good friend of mine, very dear friend. And I have a very long list of quotes from Jim Silva that just crazy things Jim Silva has said. Poor guy, he's going to get these dumped on him at his funeral. I hate listening to that guy. He bounces back and forth between topics like a fart in a skillet, was what he said once. When you create a bad experience for other people, it becomes input for the control variables, and they're deciding where to classify you. Your constellation of things, Your clusters of thought. Whenever you receive new input or meet someone new, your first inclination is to classify that input. In other words, you want to place it in a cluster of like things. Constellations of thought are the very basis of reputation and bias. The worst kinds of reputation and bias problems are when people have placed you in a constellation where they automatically apply very negative attributes. That's where bias comes from. That's where racial bias comes from. That's where religious bias comes from. It's where gender bias comes from. It's because people have built that constellation, they've put people into it, and they have a really difficult time readjusting the way that they see those things when that input comes at them. It's not fair. It's definitely not fair. But it's the truth, and it's the actuality. So let's turn that around, and let's test the way this works. So this is the next survey. What words or memories come to mind when you think of Yosemite Valley? If maybe you've been to Yosemite before. Go ahead and scan and put these in. Okay. El Capitan, the big rock that you can climb there. I can see memories coming out. Probably somebody spent some time there. It was hot. Okay, so it was hot for somebody in Yosemite Valley. Mac OS, that's interesting. Mountain climbing, oh good heavens. If somebody has climbed those rocks in Yosemite, respect. Rappelling even, good heavens, wow. Beauty outdoor, fire, yep. There was a fire outside of Yosemite when I was there once, and it was the smoke and the sunset made an incredible view of Half Dome. That's my memory. All right, thimble, somebody's hacking. I don't think it was supposed to have graphics in a word chart, but well done whoever pulled that one off. All right, this is helpful. So what you're starting to see is perhaps you entered a word and that was the thing that you thought, but other people have other things that they associate with Yosemite. And it's helping you to see that your constellation of things may be a little bit different than everybody else's. But there generally are some trends that go in a certain way. So how does that apply to you? Well, the Oz principle, from the book The Oz Principle, there's a pyramid of beliefs. Experience creates belief. Beliefs influence actions. And then, of course, actions produce results. But the important part I want to focus on are the first two. Experience create beliefs. Other people's experience with you influences their beliefs about you. That is how they are placing you in their spot in the constellation. Their experience with you is how they're doing that. So the experiences that you create for them, the experience they have having related to you in some way, is the way that they're thinking of you in their mind. And their beliefs will influence the actions, the way they speak to you, the way they treat you, the way they consider what you have to say. All of it is associated with their beliefs about you. Those beliefs were created in their constellation by the experiences that they had with you. So getting back to the beginning, you've got a lot to offer, but people aren't taking you seriously. Ask yourself, what experiences have others had with me? What constellation have they placed me in? Others' constellation of you, where have they placed you in their heads? What actions did you take that shaped their experiences with you? They may be fair, they may not be fair, but they're what's in there. You can't control what's in somebody else's head. All you can do is influence it. The way you influence it is by the experiences that you create with that person. So what experiences of you have you given to others? Don't worry, the rest of these actually go a lot faster because they're all based on these first two principles. Do they see you in a way that you think they should see you? What experiences can you change that will force them to reevaluate the constellation they've placed you in? So for avoiding mistake number one, creating bad experiences of you for others, to avoid it, learn early in your career to shape the experiences others have with you. Experiences change beliefs, and beliefs lead to actions. To fix, give people new experiences that don't fit with your class variables. Do something different. Do something that's associated with the way you want them to experience you, and watch the change occur. It's also important to note that you should do the same for others. Know that other people will change over time. 23 years in healthcare, I was a very different person at the beginning of my career than I was 5 years into it. I was then a very different person 10 years into it, 15 years into it. People change. You should expect to change. You should also expect that other people will change. Allow yourself to change your constellations of them. All right, mistake number 2 has to do with the imposter syndrome. All right, one more survey. How would you rank your computer hacking skills? And this was a scale of 1 to 5. How would you rank your computer hacking skills? Are you pretty darn good? Are you pretty much a novice? Can you hold your own? Or do computers laugh at you when you walk by? Let's see how this starts to come out. We're at 17, 19, 20. Okay, this is going to be important, how this comes out, because it's going to probably change the way you thought about coming into this room. So we're at statistically significant 30 now. When you walked into this conference, when you came to this conference, did you look at everybody around you and think, these guys are all really, really good hackers? They're all incredibly good hackers. They're probably phenomenal hackers. I don't want them to know how little I know about hacking. But you look at this survey and you realize most people are very much in the C and D category, at least the people in this particular audience. They know some things, but they wouldn't sell those skills to anyone. Pretty much a novice, just learning from others. That's how most of the people in this room feel. We got a few that are in the really, really smart category. So keep that in mind. You had an idea in your head. You had already built your constellation of the types of people that you saw around you at this conference. And when you came, you thought you understood what you were looking at. Realize that other people probably don't want you to know they don't really know what they're doing. Just the same way that many of you feel in here. This is exactly how I felt when I sat down at that table at DEF CON. I didn't want anybody at that table to know that I didn't feel like I really knew anything about hacking. I'd only been a security engineer for a year. Didn't really feel like I knew what I was doing. And yet I ended up on a team that won the World Championship Hacker Competition. The truth of the matter is, everybody feels the imposter syndrome. Everybody thinks they're nowhere near as good as they actually are. If we knew what we were doing, it wouldn't be called research now, would it? Famous quote from Albert Einstein. Everyone is faking it. It's true. The sooner you come to realize it, the sooner you'll be able to grow, because we only grow when we do something that we don't already know. Makes sense, right? That's the whole point of hacking. When you hack, you're learning something that you don't already know. You wouldn't be doing it if you already knew what you were doing. That's what hacking is. That's the art of hacking. I met a young hacker years ago in the CTF room at DEF CON at the Alexis Park. He joined our team, Digital Revelation, playing Capture the Flag. I didn't know he was a speaker that year, but he told me that he was completely blown away by how smart everybody at DEF CON was, me included. That made me feel pretty good. He said that fact was what motivated him the most. Everybody else was so smart, he wanted to be able to match up. So he practiced, he studied, and he read, he learned, and he practiced some more. Before I knew it, he said, people were asking me advice about security. I guess I'd gotten pretty good at it. That young hacker was Dan Kaminsky. If any of you know Dan Kaminsky, Dan passed away earlier this year. I say he was a young hacker because he was younger than me. They were all pretty young back in those days. Go back and look at the videos of him speaking at DEF CON 9. He looks just like Joey from the movie Hackers. It's kind of cool. He was definitely brilliant beyond his years, yet he had the imposter syndrome. He thought everybody else was smarter than him, and he worked so hard to get smarter and better at doing things, and it was his imposter syndrome that drove him to excel. That was what he taught me. Harness the imposter syndrome. To avoid mistake number 2, don't let imposter syndrome control you. Take charge of it. Use it to motivate yourself, and use knowledge that others feel the same way to grow your own community. To fix number 2, start disagreeing with that voice in your head that tells you you're not good enough. It's a lie. All right, mistakes 3 through 8 are all in the category of taming your uncouth brilliance. And that's another old picture of me. By the way, Temtel is my handle, and it's actually short for attempted to hack the telephone. That's a very old school handle. Lunchtime rant fests. The mic is always hot. This is mistake number 3. It feels so good to get it off your chest while talking to a friend at lunch. You could solve all the problems if they'd just listen to you. You're probably right. Congratulations. Do you feel better? Who else heard you? Person at the next table on the cell phone, maybe? Also in the category of uncouth brilliance, details, too many details. I love that little comic. Now that you've had an overview of the system, we're ready for a little more detail. This also relates strongly to mistake number 1, creating bad experiences. Yes, details matter, but do they really matter to a decision maker that already trusts you? They need to know how bad could it get, how soon, and how much will it cost to prevent it. That's really what a leader needs to know. That's really what a decision maker that has the budget needs to know. If you can give them that, and as long as they can trust you to use those resources to do what needs to be done, you're in good shape. You're in really good shape. But if you overwhelm them with details, you run into the imposter syndrome. Mistake number 2. I think I have that here. Oh, yeah, I'll get to that in just a second. But you run into the imposter syndrome. Remember, everybody's just an average Joe from the bottom to the top. Even the people that got really big paying, high-paying jobs, they're just an average Joe that figured out that everybody else has the imposter syndrome too. They don't want to feel like they don't know what you're talking about. If you overwhelm them with details, they'll feel like they can't keep up with you, and they'll want to get out of that situation. You want to actually tone what you actually share with them to just what they need to know. And that also fits with acronym assault. We're going to upgrade from EDR to XDR as we retire our SIM. Whether we close out our MSSP depends on whether we can staff up. Now, some of you probably know what those acronyms mean. EDR is Enterprise Endpoint. I'm already forgetting what they mean. Anyway, exactly my point. Acronym overload causes problems. That was one of the mistakes that I made a lot. Always define your acronyms, especially when you're giving a report. Define what those acronyms mean. Even if you think everybody in the room understands it, define it. Undefined acronyms create bad experiences. See mistake number 1. You won't impress them with your acronym assault. See mistake number 2. They have the imposter syndrome. Have the emotional intelligence to perceive the last thing they want is for you to find out that they don't already know what those acronyms are. That would embarrass them. All right, now we're on to mistake number 6. A vulnerability is not a risk. Now, this is something that if you've ever taken a class from me, I harp on a lot, especially in the cybersecurity side of information security. People love to say, and you can see it kind of in that slide, I know it's really small, the top 10 vulnerability endpoints with high-risk vulnerabilities. Let's just get it on the table here. There's no such thing as a high-risk vulnerability. You don't know what the risk is until you know the value of the asset the vulnerability is in, until you know the value of the consequences of that asset being compromised. You can't call it a risk. It is nothing more than a component of a risk if you identify a vulnerability. CVEs, I love it when we're identifying them and giving them a label, but avoid the temptation of making a chart like this for a leader and saying, these are our high-risk vulnerabilities. So in this particular one, how do you know the vulnerability on J.C. Taylor's computer is lower risk than on R. Frisch's computer if all you're looking at is the vulnerability? Well, if J. Saylor, I don't know what that one is handling large transactions for the company, and if they got out, it would result in competitive loss of competitive advantage, well, now you're able to assess that risk. But until you know the value of those assets or the information on those machines, you're not really going to be able to assess risk. Don't make the mistake of communicating a vulnerability as a risk when you don't really know it is. Mistake number 7, a control gap is not a risk. People love the NIST SP 800-53 control families. You get into a certain space of the information security industry, and they just love to pull all these out. It's like, oh yeah, we've got a problem with AT, awareness and training. And they'll throw these out, and they'll say, well, yeah, we've got critical risks in identification and authentication, or in authorization. Again, same problem with vulnerability assessments. A control gap is a control gap, but it's not a risk until you have assessed the value of the asset that is at risk, that control is not effectively protecting. You need to understand potential loss magnitude and threat frequency for specific threat capabilities, of specific threat capabilities contacting your asset. Which brings me to mistake number 8. This is something I've harped on over and over again. People that have ever taken a class from me, you'll hear this from me a lot. Does anyone actually know what risk is? My way of contemplating risk is heavily influenced by Jack Jones' factor analysis of information security risk, or the FAIR methodology. Risk is a function of many variables. Controls, vulnerabilities, they're just factors. They're pieces of risk information that will lead you to it. And don't worry, the next slide I'll blow up and we'll actually see all these in detail. But it's important to note, in the very least, you must estimate probable frequency and probable loss to call it a risk. Learn it, love it, profit. All right, that's the actual map. This is my own map, by the way, and I'm happy to share with anybody who wants to take a look at this. It's very much influenced by FAIR, if you've ever seen that. But this is how I think of risk, and this is how I communicate risk to leaders now. It helps me to be able to break things down in this way so that it becomes useful in the end. It took me a long time to learn this too. I made the mistakes that I think a lot of people in the industry are making. I was doing that. I was making vulnerability reports and saying, well, yeah, these are high-risk vulnerabilities. But you don't know. You don't know they're high risk until you know the value of the assets behind them. And if you make a report saying that, you're making a misleading report. Asset risk is a combination of loss event vulnerability and loss event impact. You can figure out the vulnerability. It's a combination of all kinds of things: threat frequency, resistance strength. How good are we protecting ourselves from these types of vulnerabilities? That's a piece of asset risk, but I can't do it until I combine it with the loss event impact. How bad will it get if something goes really, really wrong? And there's lots of little components to get into that: short-term costs, long-term costs. There's a wonderful study out there, and I didn't put this in a slide, but if you've heard of the Ponemon Institute, they make a great report. They combined with IBM, and they did this report. You can get on the internet, Google Ponemon Institute study, and you can download this report after you sell your soul to all the vendors that want to start sending you spam email after that. It's actually a really good report. It's worth the spam. The report talks about every industry and the cost of a data security breach by industry. You'll see that healthcare, for those of you that are in healthcare out there, healthcare has the highest cost per data breach incident of any other industry. It's at $429 per record as of the last report that I saw. So it makes it easy for you to tell somebody how serious the risk is. If all I can see is I've got a vulnerability in this server, you can say, this vulnerability is in a server that has 2.6 million patient records in it. Well, multiply 2.6 million patient records by $429 per record. Now you can tell that leader how risky it is for that vulnerability to remain on that server. Now you're speaking their language. All right. Hack to learn, learn to teach. This is mistakes 9 through 10 that I made in my career. And by the way, that's a little circuit. I love electronics tinkering. That's a little, for those of you that are into ham radio, I love the little Chinese Baofeng radios. And I wanted to be able to take my cheap $20 Baofeng radio and hook it up to my computer to be able to do packet radio. So I designed this little device to do that. It's an audio separator with a transformer, a USB sound card attached to it that directly connects to the separator, plugs into the side of the radio, and then USB straight to the computer. Handy. Lots of fun. I like to hack because I learn things as I hack. Under the category of hack to learn, I don't speak Corpy or Govy. Mistake number 9, I've observed at least 3 distinct languages in the information security industry. There is hacker language, there's hacker speak, Corpy speak, and Govy speak. 3 different languages, but you got to learn to speak all 3 in this industry. You got to learn to be able to speak all 3 of them because they come from completely different standpoints. Govys use words like cyber theater completely differently than Corpys do. To a Corpy, cyber theater is that thing you do to scare executives into investing into your budget. To a Govy, cyber theater is a theater of warfare. They are vastly different meanings, yet they sometimes use the same words to use it. You got to learn the difference between those two, or very big misunderstandings can occur. And then hacker speak. Hackers talk about code as a human knowledge asset, while Corpies see it as a private tangible asset or intellectual property. Open source software means a lot in the hacker industry. Privacy of software, privacy of source code means a lot to a corporate entity. Depending on your audience, you have to be prepared to think of information security in multiple ways because they see it in multiple ways. I just want to hack. Why would I need to know how to land the plane? This is mistake number 10. Now, I teach pen testing classes at some of the local colleges in Sacramento, and the quickest way to get thrown out of my class, and I've done this, I have thrown students out, the quickest way is to not show up when it's your turn to give a presentation on a penetration test. To me, landing the plane is giving the presentation. If you cannot get yourself comfortable speaking in front of an executive audience, you have no business being a pen tester. This is something I will preach over and over again. You may love to hack, you may love to penetrate networks, you may love to break code. You must learn how to communicate what you learn when you do those things. Otherwise, you are just like the 9/11 attackers that only wanted to learn how to fly, but they didn't care to learn how to land the plane. Giving a presentation after you do a penetration test, that's landing the plane. And it's no value if you haven't learned to teach. So it's hack to learn, learn to teach. You do the hacking to learn where the problems are, but then you have to learn to teach what you found to people that don't understand it like you. Hack to learn, learn to teach. Very important principle in the information security world. All right, in summary, from the sections that we talked through, quit complaining that people don't respect you. They do. Instead, change how they experience you. Second, stop letting imposter syndrome control you. Use it to motivate you to become the expert that you see in others. Dan Kaminsky was the best lesson I ever got was from Dan. Tame your uncouth brilliance. Learn to persuade without offending. Turn passion for change into leadership of change. Become the solution to broken things. And then hack to learn, learn to teach. This means learning Govy and Corpy. This means learning to land the plane. Thank you. And that picture, by the way, is DEF CON 10 Hacker Captured the Flag. That's the award ceremony, and that's Dark Tangent on the right when he was a lot younger. He's got the black badges in his hand. He was about to hand them out to all of us. And the box that's right in front of him is where he was about to hand us out all our leather jackets. So that was fun. So thank you, everybody.